So, I'm here at Curve with Kirsty Munroe, one of Leicester's leading comedians. So we're going to talk to you, Kirsty, today about how you write new material. So, tell us about making new material for comedy performances.
Right, well, I don't know, I think with new material, comedians often get really nervous, because, I don't know, it's sometimes it's great and you get really excited when an idea just pops into your head, or when you just suddenly think of a joke or something funny. Sometimes it's really fun and great, and you think, oh brilliant, you've got something, and then sometimes you get writer's block and you just, that's like banging your head against a brick wall and you just try to squeeze something out of your brain. But I don't know, I tried lots of different ways of writing new stuff. Often mine is just, a lot of it is kind of inspired by true events, which I shouldn't really say, but and it's sort of, you just sort of take it to the next level, or you kind of just go a bit creative on things that are happening. But I like to make it about kind of things that are kind of true to me in whatever way, and so that's often why you write new material, because new things happen in your life, and
So you got all these ideas and experiences washing around inside your head.
Mm-hmm.
Do you actually get to the point where you start writing on paper, on a computer, words, scripts?
Yeah, I tried lots of different ways. I think my first ever 10 minutes came really easily, and now I'm just sort of, it seems to get harder. I don't know why. I think it's the more aware you become of the whole process. But yeah, sometimes I jot things down. Sometimes I go straight to the laptop. Sometimes I make little notes in my iPhone. Sometimes I draw pictures, or other things. And often you'll think of something, and you're out on a night out or whatever, and then you don't write it down, and then you curse yourself and you never remember, and you forget your stuff.
So how long does it take to come up with a completely new act?
It depends if you count all the sort of procrastination and making endless cups of coffee, or looking on Facebook and procrastinating like you do with anything. I don't know. That's a how long is a piece of string question, I think, because sometimes, like I say, it comes to you like a bolt of lightning of inspiration. It's brilliant. Other times, it'll take quite a long time. Usually, I'm quite a last minute person. I have to have a horrendous deadline, knowing that I've got a gig and I've got to do new material, and that I have to write something. So I don't know if that. I don't really work in time scales very well. My friends always say they have to tell me kind of a meeting time half an hour before we're supposed to meet. I kind of very much head in the clouds with my sense of timing.
So it's about trying to get the overall structure of the act sorted out in your mind, how long it's going to take. Is it a 20-minute, 25-minute, that sort of thing? You've got bits, one bit leads on to another bit, and so on. And then you've got to put the actual details in. To what extent do you actually think about the words that you're going to say?
I tend to write it and then sort of improvise it and perform it in my bedroom to nobody, with a little toy microphone, and then you sort of get the flow by practicing it. But I guess people do it in all sorts of different ways, but that's how I tend to do it. And often when you get a really good gig, when you're really in the moment and you're really on fire and enjoying it, things come to you on the spot then, and then you put them in your next routine.
Do you ever try it out with somebody, get a second opinion? You've got this half-formed kind of act in your mind, and you can play it back to yourself, but do you ever get a mate round and say, hey, look at this, I'm going to do this, tell me what you think?
Yeah, I do sometimes. I never used to, because I used to be quite private with it until I sort of got on stage. But now I've got kind of a collective of other comedians, and we're writing sketches together and performing together as a collective. So I think it's about finding the right person to share it with, really. Yeah, because sometimes when it's in the sort of creation, you don't necessarily want to show it unless you're ready for, unless it's sort of fully formed in your mind and you know what you're doing.
Because as a comedian, you work more or less on your own. You might have support slots with other comedians, but I mean, you're not part of the double act. You're the Kirsty Munroe.
I'm the Kirsty Munroe, yes.
So
there are several
you
others.
more or less got to produce your own material on your own.
Yes.
And you don't have script writers like sort of really big
No.
people do.
I like to keep it real, as they say, and write my own stuff. Yeah, because I think it's very kind of. I mean, it's kind of an alter ego persona, but it's also very personal to me. So sometimes people will tell me jokes and stuff, and I'm like, oh, you can put that in your routine, but unless it fits, unless it sort of feels right and it fits with me, unless it sort of comes from me, then I don't really want to do that on stage, because it's very much about, you know, I don't know, I think you have to be fully kind of confident with it, and for me it's less about kind of just jokes, it's very much from my sort of perspective. So.
Having seen your performances several times now, I know the kind of stuff you do, and it's a way, it's like you talking to your audience, and it's not acting a script like you would if you were an actor in a play. It feels like, from the audience point of view, you're actually just talking to them, and people in the audience probably not aware how much rehearsal and thinking and pre-programming has gone into it. And is that really what you want to end up with, something that flows as though it is just being off the cuff extemporised?
Yeah, I think I've tended to sort of stick reasonably rigid to the material that I have, but when I'm, you know, having a really good gig, I sort of will sort of flow with it a bit more and improvise with it a bit more. And I think I would like to sort of experiment a bit more so that I can kind of go off on tangents and come back. But yeah, I want to keep it that kind of chatty, kind of that connection, like that it is just kind of like someone said to me, oh, you just look back, you're sort of, you know, chatting to your mates kind of thing. So I guess I do want it to be like a conversation.
So you kind of put an act together and you've got it all sorted out. You go and do your first trial of that new material, and then as you gradually do more and more gigs with that particular act, you're kind of extemporising, experimenting, ideas come up, and it kind of evolves and grows. Is that the way it works?
Yeah, it is. It's kind of like, I don't know, sometimes you feel like less in control of it. I mean, it's kind of, I kind of experiment with different styles, I suppose, and sometimes you more sort of sit down and think, right, I've got to write some material about this or whatever. But sometimes ideas just come to you. Like, I do sort of songs and stuff in mine, and you sort of think, oh, does that really fit with, you know, the rest of my act, and does that really fit with but yeah, I do kind of experiment with different kind of styles, and yeah, I guess I'm still in the kind of exploring and experimenting kind of phase, which is fun. I think the pressure to write new material is good, because you can never get a set that you're fully happy with, because you always want to drop something new in, and you always want to refine it. And if you have an amazing gig, you in a way you just really want to recreate that, but you want to get better as well. You want to progress, and I think keeping yourself on your toes and writing new material all the time is really good.
Is there a best time of the day for you? Are you a kind of morning person, night owl? Is it
I don't know, I've not discovered it yet, if there is. When I was preparing for my Edinburgh Fringe show, I was working I'd like to say I'm sort of semi-unemployed, semi-full-time comedian, so at the moment, but then I was working, so I would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and rehearse and write, and then sort of be up all hours doing it late in the night as well. So I guess that kind of worked. I got a good show out of that. That was fun. Fun to do, to perform, but I'm not getting up at 6 in the morning anymore. So maybe I should to get the creativity flowing. I don't know.
Comedians tend to work at night, don't they? I mean, it's a night time thing, really, isn't it? So you're bound not to get up too early the next morning if you've had a show or if you've been out.
Yeah, I'm never very good at getting out of bed. It took a lot of kicking myself up to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to write.
And there are days when it simply doesn't work. Dead days, where you just can't do it.
Yeah, there are horrible days when you've just got nothing going on. But I guess it's a bit like it's changing it and doing something that will inspire you. Because when you're just stuck in that block, set there with a blank screen or whatever, it's just never going to work. So get out and walk, or go out and watch some other comedy or something, or go out and get drunk or whatever. That's usually one of my default options. But yeah, just change of scenery and stuff like that. But I guess the more you do, it's a bit like, your sex life and things like that. It's kind of, keep it going, keep it flowing.
Do you ever talk to other comedians? Have you ever talked to other comedians about how they do their work, how they make their new material? Is it a very kind of private?
God, I love talking to other comedians.
Are they reluctant to do that, or
no,
are they very
I find
happy
to? It's a very fascinating world. It's almost like an addiction when you've done stand-up comedy. I always encourage people. People always say to me, I get a lot of people coming up to me saying, I'd really like to do stand-up, I'd really like to give it a try. And I always say, well, go give it a try. But then I look back and think, God, what have I told them to get into? Because once you do it, it's almost like a drug addiction. It's like when you get a good gig, you feel on top of the world, and when you get a terrible one, you feel rock bottom. But you always are thinking, straight after the gig, when's my next one? And when you're approaching the gig, you're thinking, God, get me out of this anyhow. Because it is really scary getting up in front of people and thinking, I've got to make you laugh. But what was the question? I've gone off on.
Whether you share that creative process with other comedians to compare notes.
Yeah, I think, pretty much all the comedians I've met are really, encouraging and really happy to share and talk with you. I find it's a very fascinating world because it's kind of hidden. When you go and watch a comedy gig, you don't necessarily see the makings of it and see what goes on behind the scenes, and you'd maybe think because it's individual, that it's very competitive, and it is competitive, I guess, in a way. But I've always found pretty much everyone I've met to be really, really supportive. I think because the comedians know what it takes and know that it is, people always say to me, oh, you're really brave and, whatever else. But it's just such a strange experience that I think other comedians understand that. And I've found everyone to be very supportive, and it's just a fascinating thing to be able to talk to other comedians about it.
Do you ever check what other people are doing, particularly if they've got a stand-up act that might be slightly similar to you? I mean, you said it was competitive, but I mean, do you try to position yourself in the comedy market away from other people to appear as original as possible, or do you say, oh well, she's doing something similar to me and everybody loves that, so if I do something similar, that will be good for me?
No, I think because I was kind of the first time I did it, I didn't really think about it. I just kind of thought, well, maybe this would be funny, and did it. So it's always been very kind of real and personal to me. I've never really thought about it from that kind of perspective of what's going down well, what would work. I've just kind of done what I enjoy doing and what I think is funny. I mean, it is competitive, but it's also, I find most people are just like, yeah, good on you, and most people, it's not really, it's kind of like, you want to get, if you see someone else being successful, you want a taste of that. But I find it's not, I've not found it to be competitive in a nasty way, more in a very supportive way. But I guess that you look at people who are maybe similar to you and see, you know, it's always good to get inspired and to kind of see what other people are doing and how that works. But I think it's about just being you and doing what you want to do and finding your audience that way.
So if it's about being you, do you consciously try and develop the Kirsty Munroe persona? To what extent do you kind of look at yourself from outside yourself and say, how can I develop me as a person on stage?
Yeah, gosh, yeah, I have done that and turned myself inside out. There's a bit in my routine that I've been road testing recently, some new stuff about about going a bit bonkers, and I think it's a well documented thing that a lot of stand-up comedians do have tendencies or have had experiences of mental illness in whatever ways. But that did really turn me inside out, because I started off thinking, you know, this is a persona of myself, but then you are looking outside of yourself at yourself, and then you have the self-doubt and you're thinking, you know...
So in a way you're kind of inventing a character like you do in soap operas or films or theatre that may be a reflection of you as a real day-to-day person, but it's also building up a recognisable character that other people can relate to.
Yeah, it is. It's like a sort of caricature of yourself. So you've kind of got to have an endless sense of humour with yourself, which is kind of the sort of rock bottom that I hit and came up again, and which is one of the fantastic things about comedy, is that I think laughter is a way of kind of getting over, you know, things, and it's a healing thing, and it's a classic thing of laughter being medicine for life. And you often find, you know, some of the horrible experiences, that's the thing with your mates, they're your biggest inspiration, because whatever, you know, happens, that you could, you know, take the piss out of each other. Am I allowed to swear? Sorry. You can, you know, you laugh at each other, and that's one of the brilliant things about life, I think, is you need that. You always need to laugh at something to get over it.
Because with audiences, you know, the typical comedy-loving audience member is somebody that will sit in front of the television and watch all sorts of comedic characters on soap opera or live at the Apollo, or, you know, there's people with their own shows, and then they go out to live shows and see people. And there's all sorts of different styles of comedy, you know, in stand-up alone, they're all different in the way that they do things. But it's all about building up this character that is recognisable, that people can get used to. And, you know, some comedians will say, oh, my on-stage character is totally different from me as I really am. I mean, how's that for you?
I think, I don't know, no, it is just kind of an exaggerated version of me, really.
Does that worry you?
It did. It doesn't anymore. I think
you can
started
live with your on-stage alter ego, in other words.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely. I think I started out, and, you know, and then you don't really know what you're kind of just doing it, and then you know, and you have good gigs, bad gigs, good gigs. So I was happy with the sort of persona at first, then I kind of fell out with myself, had a big row with myself, fell out, and now I've kind of made up with my stage persona of my comedy, and I'm just kind of taking it in different places and stuff. Yeah, it can send you a little crazy, but yeah, I think it is quite true to me. I suppose it was because I was up there doing it and it was working, and then the more I went on, the more I realised the sort of reflection on me. But then I've kind of, I think...
You tend to be very hypercritical about your performances, you know, you'll come off stage afterwards, oh, that was absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
Or do you come away glowing, well, didn't I do well? You know, how does that work?
You're always your own worst critic, hopefully. You're always you're always analysing, you know, could have done that, what worked, what didn't. But sometimes when it really clicks and everything, you know when you get a good gig when you really feel like, yes, great, and that's the ones you do it for, really. So if you were always, well, if I was always, you know, oh, that was terrible, then that would be bad. But it's hard to keep the balance, really, of getting a big head and, you know, not beating yourself up so much that you feel terrible. I think
it's like
just
reviews in the press. I mean, if you do get a review written about you, I mean, do you make a point of reading it? Because I mean, some actors have said to me, "Oh, I would never read a review. I hate seeing what people have written about me." I mean, if it's good, you feel great. If it's not so good, you feel, well, what do you feel if it's not a good review? I mean, do you go away and lock yourself in a darkened room until you get over it, or do you go away saying, right, I'm going to deal with this, you know?
I think one of the things I learned from Edinburgh was to take feedback, because I think before it's still, you know, it's still very fresh and real for me, the experience of doing stand-up, but I think before I didn't necessarily understand why I had a good gig or why I had a bad gig, and you'd overanalyze it and whatever else, and I think I sort of went sort of more emotionally through it according to how I felt about it and whatever, and because it is so very exposing, I think it is hard to take the negative or the other feedback or anything like that. But I think I've learned that, you know, I would read every review, definitely, because you can learn from it, and yeah, it's always good. I mean, it's always nice to hear the nice things, but in a way you kind of learn more from the things that maybe didn't work. And yeah, I would read every review, and I think it's just about keeping that balance and thinking, well, I do want to get better, and sort of letting it go as well. If one gig's done bad, learn from the next one and thing. But people always say to me, you never stop dying. Comedians always say, if you have a bad gig, you call it dying, because you do literally feel like you're dying on the inside. But yeah, it's just to get better. And with writing sketches as well, I've had some really good experiences of getting feedback on my writing, because it helps you realise how your brain works. And I realised that sometimes you need to sort of get out of your head and have someone else read it or look at it from a different perspective to notice what's there. Because I often have so many ideas. Sometimes I have loads of ideas at the same time, and there's one maybe nugget of something that's vaguely useful that you can take on. So yeah, definitely feedback is really useful.
Kirsty Munroe, thank you very much.
Thank you.